Trade deadline's coming up. The Bucks aren't really talked about a whole lot, just as they don't have a ton of assets to deal. If they did make a trade, what kind of player would they be looking for? And are there like realistic names that are out there, maybe that you've heard or maybe that fans talk about a lot?
Yeah, I mean, I think the tough part is Jay Crowder has been out for the last 9 weeks, I believe it was. He came back in the Bucks blowout loss in Cleveland on Wednesday. I think that is kind of the archetype of player that you're thinking about for the Milwaukee Bucks. And this is any contender, right? Like you're always looking for more wing defenders,
Yeah.
big wing defenders, small wing defenders. Like you're just looking for wing defenders. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of what you're after. And the Bucks have been looking for one of those for 4 years at this point. This is every trade deadline comes around. If we recorded this podcast last year, 1 year ago, I would have said the Bucks are looking for a wing defender.
Yeah.
And 2 years ago, I would have said the same thing. And 3 years ago, I would have said the same thing. So that's always what you're looking for. But this year, I think it's maybe a little bit more concerning. You don't have one of the best defenses in the league, and you're looking at like, oh, it would be a real luxury to have this great wing defender. I think this year it's more of a need. Like I think Malik, to be clear, Malik Beasley is, I mean, he's putting together the best shooting season in the league at the moment. Like he's shooting near 50%. I think his volume's at 5.5 per game.
Yep.
He's hitting all the wide open catch and shoot threes. He's hitting jab step threes on people. Like he's just having a really incredible season offensively, but defensively, he doesn't really bring that type of tenacity, that intensity that the Bucks have had over the years. So I think it'd be nice if they had another pitch to throw. And again, maybe that is Jay Crowder. Maybe that is Jay Crowder comes back and all of a sudden you use some small ball lineups that would be like Giannis at center, Jay Crowder at the 4, Chris Middleton at the 3, and Andre Jackson at the 2. And then all of a sudden, outside of Dame Lillard, you're 6'7" and above, and you're massive and you can, try to eat up space that way. That isn't something we've really gotten to see thus far, just because Jay Crowder's been out for the last 9 weeks. So I'd be curious to see kind of what that does. But I think that's largely what you're looking for. What really hampers the Bucks on the trade market right now is they don't, because of their top heavy roster, and this is true of a lot of teams around the league. This is what modern roster building is. You have a top heavy roster. You have 3 guys eating up a lot of your salary cap. And in the Bucks case, 4 guys, because Brook Lopez also has a big contract. The middle area, which to me is where in-season trade deadline trades happen, is between 10 million and 20 million in salary, maybe up to 25 now, or maybe it's 15 to 25, however you want to look at it, as the league's salary cap has grown. That's where trades happen. And the Bucks just don't really have a lot of those contracts.
Yeah.
You have a guy like Bobby Portis, who's in that the lower end of that range. You have a guy like Pat Connaughton, who's even lower. And then all of a sudden you got to figure out like, all right, if I put together Bobby Portis, Marjon Beauchamp, and a second round pick, I think salary wise, you get into the teens, like the low teens. And then are those assets good enough? Also, do you feel like you can actually go around with only 2 big men in Giannis and Brook Lopez? Is that enough size? Is Jay Crowder actually a 4? And that's fine. Or is he too small and you don't have enough size? And I think that's kind of the tough part. Like if the Bucks want to make a trade here at the deadline, it probably has to be Pat Connaughton or Bobby Portis as your salary cap like lead, right? Like how you're going to get to the spot where interesting players are available. And then do teams still want Marjon Beauchamp? Like, has he done enough? Is he developing in the way that still makes him interesting and, desirable? Do you look at that second round pick that they have? That's the Blazers. So that should be a high second rounder this year. Is that enough? So it's putting that package together. And then as far as players that you're looking at, I mean, I think you probably have to, with those realities in mind, be thinking about, like a guy in Brooklyn, like Dorian Finney-Smith. That's, in that salary range where you could potentially make a deal. I mean, you look at a guy like in Cleveland, like Isaac Okoro. Okoro has been more important for them recently because Darius Garland's been out, but maybe in another month when we get close to the deadline, he's not as important and someone that they want to move. In Phoenix, Josh Okogie hasn't played as Grayson Allen, who Bucks fans ironically really hated for the last year, is putting together a season on par with Malik Beasley. Like
Yeah.
he's been really, really good. But because Grayson Allen has emerged, Josh Okogie has not, been quite as impactful as he has in previous years. And those are, to me, like if you're looking at how the Bucks do stuff, that's kind of got to be the range of player that you're talking about. And when you're talking about that player, that's not a new starter, right? Like that is not someone that's replacing Malik Beasley. That is another pitch that you can throw. That is just another way that you can go in the playoffs. And then I think when you get to that level and you think about it in that way, you have to be thinking about like, all right, is that worth it? Because you got Pat Connaughton at home. Like maybe Pat Connaughton can do that. Maybe Jay Crowder can do that. Maybe, I mean, if you're trying to find a young, impactful defensive wing, you got some Andre Jackson at home. Why not just try that out? And that to me is kind of where you got to go through all of this and try to figure out like, all right, we could potentially make a move. And John Horst has always been very aggressive. He always wants to add to the team, but you got to figure out if that is actually worthwhile. Is that something that, is going to increase the likelihood of you winning a championship, or are you going to get that person and it's just not going to work? Like I know the Bucks have been connected to PJ Tucker on the buyout market. And it's like, okay, yeah, you could get PJ Tucker, but it's another situation where don't you already have some PJ Tucker at home? Like, isn't Jay Crowder 5 years younger than PJ Tucker? And I mean, I would guess in the exact same mold, in the exact same role.
Yeah.
So that to me is where this is why you're not hearing the Bucks connected to a lot of people, because when you add up every part of the situation, whether it's salary cap, assets, actual roles that are available for the team, you got to go through all this and figure out like, how much sense does it make to make a trade? Like, what are you actually adding? What are you trying to find? And do you already have that on your roster? And it just needs to be used in a different way, or coached in a different way, or deployed tactically in a different way. And that's why I think it gets a little bit difficult to try to figure out. And maybe it's as simple as, all right, we got to figure out our own stuff first. We have a bunch of guys here. We have a bunch of things here that we could figure out on our own before we go and make a trade for something new.